seniors who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Thursday, April 9th. Your readers today are
Pat Lamont
and Ruth Nowotniak. And our weather forecast. Breezy and warm today, a couple of showers in the afternoon, high of 68. A shower in places in the evening, otherwise clouds breaking tonight, low 43. Cooler tomorrow with periods of rain, high of 48. Saturday, mostly sunny with a high of 52. And Sunday, partly sunny with a high of 61. Nationally, the high was at Borrego Springs, California at 90 degrees, and the low was at Saranac Lake, New York at -3. Our sunrise was at 6:44 today, and it will set this evening at 7:51. And we are not even going to go to the snow because we're done with that part of the weather report. And on to the front page. Loss of Peoples-Stokes will be a blow to Buffalo. And this is from the Albany Bureau Chief. Last year, when Governor Kathy Hochul agreed to include a financial aid package for the city of Buffalo in the state budget, it came at the urging of a Buffalonian she had known for nearly 30 years, Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes. I will say that I know that Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes has enormous influence in this building, and she has been a champion for this, Hochul said, standing in the state capitol. On Wednesday, when Peoples-Stokes announced she would not seek re-election, it signaled the pending conclusion of that influence, especially in Western New York. Buffalo will no longer have the second most powerful member of the Assembly as its representative in the 141st District, which is heavily based on Buffalo's east side. Peoples-Stokes, 74, was the first woman and first black woman to serve as Assembly Majority Leader. Buffalo loses considerable clout with the retirement of Crystal Peoples-Stokes, said Blair Horner, a longtime state government watchdog at the New York Public Interest Group. She is far up the political food chain, and losing her will undoubtedly reduce the benefits Buffalo receives. Former Mayor Byron Brown, a longtime ally of Peoples-Stokes and fellow member of Grassroots, the black political organization that rose in the 1990s in Buffalo, raved about the departing lawmaker's local influence. Crystal Peoples-Stokes has always been extremely responsive and effective in addressing the needs of Buffalo and Western New York and Albany, he said in a statement. She always made sure our voices were heard and our needs were met, whether it was passing important legislation or bringing back more money for street repair, economic development, housing, arts and culture, and supporting the growth of minority and women-owned businesses. She is one of the most well-respected members of the state legislature, and her legacy is one of delivering significant results for Buffalo and statewide. In a statement, Hochul recalled her friendship with Peoples-Stokes dating back 28 years to when they knocked on doors campaigning. Crystal has shown that Buffalo toughness and resilience, standing up and fighting for her community every step of the way, Hochul said. When she sets her mind to do something, get out of her way, because she's going to do it. I thank God every day that Crystal Peoples-Stokes has been my friend, neighbor, and colleague, and we will miss her. Peoples-Stokes, a former Erie County legislator and majority leader, showed her political grit, even in defeat in 2000, when she challenged Assembly powerhouse Arthur Eve, an incumbent since 1966, and the deputy speaker. Peoples-Stokes lost the Democratic primary, but set the stage for a win in 2002 when Eve had retired. Even before her election to the state legislature, Peoples-Stokes had formed a friendship with a person to whom she would long give support, Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie from the Bronx. It was Heastie who in 2018 picked her to become majority leader and second most powerful position to Speaker. In Peoples-Stoke, Hastie found a majority leader who had experience as chair of the Legislative Subcommittee for Minority and Women-Owned Businesses, and later the New York State Legislative Women's Caucus. On Wednesday, Hastie noted that Peoples-Stokes taught him the meaning of Juneteenth, June 19, a date to observe the end of slavery, long before it was a federal holiday. He lauded her for her work creating diversity initiatives in medicine and teaching, decriminalizing the use of cannabis, and the inclusion of provisions in law to expunge low-level cannabis convictions. For more than 2 decades here in the Assembly, Crystal has been a voice for her community in Buffalo, as well as for communities across our state that have historically been disenfranchised and left behind. Crystal has been more than a majority leader. She has been my friend, advisor, sister, and my biggest supporter. When Hastie appointed her majority leader, Dottie Gallagher, Chief Executive Officer of the Buffalo-Niagara Partnership, said New York City lawmakers had dominated the agenda of state government. To have someone like Crystal who really gets Buffalo and all of Western New York and upstate is probably the best leverage we're going to have in any any upstate influence over Albany. On Wednesday, in a statement, Gallagher praised Peoples-Stokes as a strong voice for Buffalo to stimulate downtown development, drive investment, and bridge unexpected decreases in public benefits. Her shoes will be difficult to fill, and we hope her successor will build upon the majority's leader's work to strengthen our regional economy. Kristen Bieber, a spokesperson for Kaleida Health, the region's largest healthcare provider, echoed that sentiment. The departure of Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes from the New York State Assembly will be felt by all, she said in a statement. She has been a tremendous partner with Kaleida Health, as well as a strong voice and advocate for all Western New Yorkers. Last year, Peoples-Stokes went to bat for then-Mayor Christopher Scanlon, urging Hochul and her fellow lawmakers in the Democratic-controlled Assembly to include the proposed sale of city parking ramps to a newly created Buffalo Parking Authority, as well as a 3% hotel occupancy or bed tax in the state budget. Even lawmakers such as then-Senator Sean Ryan, now Buffalo mayor, voted for the plan, despite expressing reservations. This year, Peoples-Stokes and her fellow Assembly Democrats voted for a budget plan that would give Buffalo $222.1 million in state aid, nearly $17 million more than the levels proposed by Hochul and State Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins from Yonkers.
How Trump pivoted from a dire threat to a shaky pause. President Trump, over the course of a single day, went from threatening Iran with annihilation to proclaiming that the battered Islamic Republic's leadership had presented a workable plan that led him to agree to a 14-day ceasefire that he hopes will pave the way to end the nearly 6-week war. The dramatic shift in tenor came as intermediaries led by Pakistan worked feverishly to head off a further escalation. Even China, Iran's biggest trading partner and America's most significant economic competitor, quietly pulled strings to find a path toward a ceasefire, according to 2 officials briefed on the matter who were not authorized to comment publicly and spoke on the condition of anonymity. The reason for doing so is that we already have met and exceeded all military objectives and are far along with the definitive agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East, Trump said in a social media post Tuesday announcing the temporary ceasefire. It came about 90 minutes before his deadline for Tehran to open the critical Strait of Hormuz or see its power plants and other critical infrastructure obliterated. But even as the White House was celebrating the moment as a victory, the fragile ceasefire appeared in danger of falling apart Wednesday as the U.S., Iran, and Israel offered differing statements on what was included in the deal less than 24 hours after it was brokered. Iran insisted that an an end to the Israeli war in Lebanon was part of the ceasefire agreement with the U.S., but Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Trump said the truce did not cover Lebanon and the Israeli operations there continued. The U.S., meanwhile, demanded that Iran make good on reopening the strait after the Islamic Republic closed the waterway in response to Israel's intensifying attacks against the Hezbollah militant group in Lebanon. Vice President Vance, who is set to lead the U.S. delegation to Pakistan this week for mediated talks with Iran aimed at finding a permanent agreement to end the conflict, downplayed the setbacks. We're seeing evidence that things are going in the right direction, but it's going to take a little time, Vance told reporters. The president met at the White House with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte on Wednesday, with the emerging plan to reopen the strait expected to be at the center of their talks. Trump has been angry that NATO member countries ignored his call to help reopen the vital waterway as gas prices soared during the war. As the pipeline neared, Democratic lawmakers decried Trump's threat to wipe away an entire civilization as a moral failure. U.S.-born Pope Leo warned that strikes against civilian infrastructure would violate international law and said the Republican president's comments were truly unacceptable. In the end, Trump may have backed down because of a simple truth. Escalation could risk involving the United States in the sort of forever war that had bedeviled his predecessors in the White House, and that he had vowed he would keep the U.S. out if voters elected him again. As Trump boasted about U.S. and Israeli military success over the past 6 weeks, he appeared to be working from the premise that he would bomb Iran into capitulation, starting with the killing of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in the opening salvos. He seemed to discount that the Iranian leadership could opt for a long and bloody war. The Islamic Republic over the past 47 years has shown it is willing to dig in, even when it appears to America to be working against its own self-interest. The clerical leadership held Americans hostage for 444 days from late 1979 to early 1981 at the cost of the country's international standing. The mullahs allowed the Iran-Iraq war to go on for 4 years, leaving hundreds of thousands dead. Iran stood by Hamas after the October 7, 2023 attack that ultimately defanged the Iran-backed group in Gaza, as well as Hezbollah in London, and created the conditions that led to the collapse of Bashar Assad's government in Syria and authoritarian rule supported by Tehran. Iran's leadership exuded confidence that it could bog down the world superpower in a costly and extended conflict, even if it might not defeat the U.S. military. Defense analysts largely agreed that the U.S. military could quickly take control of the narrow Persian Gulf waterway between Iran and Oman, through which roughly 20% of the world's oil flows on any given day. But maintaining security over the strait would require a high-risk resource-intensive operation that could be a years-long American commitment. Ben Conable, executive director of the nonprofit Battle Research Group, said securing the strait would require the U.S. military to maintain control of some of the 375 miles of Iranian territory, from Kish Island to the west to Bandar Abbas in the east, in order to stop Iran from firing missiles at passing ships. It is a mission that Conable said would likely require three U.S. infantry divisions, roughly 30,000 to 45,000 troops. this would be an indefinite operation. So, be ready to do this for 20 years, said Conable. We didn't think we were going to be in Afghanistan for 20 years. We didn't think we were going to have to be in Vietnam as long as we were, or Iraq. The 2-week ceasefire includes allowing Iran and Oman to charge fees on ships transiting through Hormuz, a regional official said. The official said Iran would use money it raised for reconstruction.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time is approximately 15 minutes past the hour, and we will go to our our opinion piece. Our editorial. Where's the choice? A UB study underscores the inequities in enrollment system at Buffalo schools. A University at Buffalo presentation during a March Buffalo School Board work session asked an interesting question. What would it look like if more families preferred their local school? That query was posed at the conclusion of the presentation under the heading Possible Next Steps for Research. But why not start dreaming now? Perhaps because, as the study showed, turning anecdotal accounts into reality by the numbers, the system designed to allow parents school choice provides, for many, anything but. The study found that 55% of these students are assigned a school they didn't apply for, according to Simone Freed, principal investigator of the Buffalo School Choice Project and an assistant professor at UB, who cited 2 years of application data. Freed added, it actually got worse when we replicated it with high school data. An article by the News' Ben Tujimoto takes a deep dive into the obstacles parents and guardians meet when trying to get a child enrolled into the school of choice. For many, navigating through the Byzantine system is nearly impossible. And those are the lucky ones, who somehow are able to make it to the other side, clutching paperwork showing their child or children will land in their preferred school. The intricate flowcharts provided in the study show the range of possibilities, with few showing a straight angle to actual school choice. As Buffalo School Board member Larry Scott said, so choice is really not a choice. The evidence is in, and it is not. The UB study was spurred by Samuel Radford III and the Western New York Educational Equity Task Force, which sought hard data to evaluate the anecdotes that school of choice was a myth. It's no surprise that the choice system tends to favor wealthy families with transportation flexibility, shows a large portion of students eyeing the same few schools, and frequently leaves parents feeling confused or helpless. Radford urged the school board to lead the design of a system that accommodates parent and student choice, while also ensuring seats for students in neighborhood schools, should they want them, thus reducing the district's ballooning transportation costs. Transportation cost is a huge issue, both here and across the nation. In an ironic twist, school choice, which should be a good thing for low-income families eager to provide the best possible education for their children, proves costly and inefficient when student transportation is factored in. Buffalo Schools' 5-year, $460 million contract with Yellow Bus Partner First Student is evidence of that financial burden. Critics have also questioned the efficiency of the district's bus routing. In a tense debate last year, Scott noted on one morning, 15 different buses picked up students on 2 blocks of his street. Could the problem be resourcing? Scott pointed to Chicago Schools' plan to heavily resource neighborhood schools without eliminating choice. There have always been strong advocates of neighborhood schools. Indeed, the value of strengthening more schools so that they are at least as desirable as criteria schools seems obvious. Getting from here to there anytime soon, though, is doubtful, given budget constraints and eventual school closures. The other disturbing point in UB's study centers on who gets choice. Less than half of the city's eligible population of white students enrolls in Buffalo schools. And of white students enrolling, nearly 60% apply only to criteria schools. As Freed said, the study team hypothesized that BPS becomes more low income overall, and certain schools become particularly more low income on average because of this pattern. The study has its skeptics, who noted that it lacked peer review and interpreted limited data. Even Fried said the team's research prompted follow-up questions. But it provided more empirical data for debate and hopefully the spark to get something done in improving real school choice for families who are clearly left out of the equation.
And another voice. High utility bills are due to states' policy, and this is written by David Bauer, who is president and CEO of National Fuel Gas Company. After Winter Storm Fern, many New Yorkers are receiving bills that are far higher than expected for both electricity and natural gas. It's easy to blame utilities, but the real driver is a long-standing structural issue. New York has spent more than a decade blocking new natural gas pipelines. New York's renewable energy goals are ambitious, but today the state still depends heavily on natural gas for roughly 40% of its electricity. Despite that dependence, no major natural gas pipeline serving the state has been approved in about 10 years. As a result, no additional capacity has been added to bring more supply into the Northeast. This becomes a major problem during extreme weather. Most people understand that tight pipeline capacity raises natural gas prices and heating costs. What's less understood is how directly it impacts electricity prices. In the Northeast, the Independent System Operator, or ISO, runs the competitive wholesale electricity market. Power plants bid based on their cost to produce electricity. For natural gas plants, fuel is their largest expense. The ISO uses the lowest cost mix of generators and a final plant needed to meet demand set the market price. Most days, that marginal plant runs on natural gas. When natural gas becomes expensive, electricity prices rise. During Fern, sharply colder temperatures created unusually high demand for both heating and electricity. Pipelines into the Northeast quickly reached full capacity, and basic supply and demand forces took hold. Natural gas prices in downstate New York and New England surged. As fuel costs jumped, gas-fired generators raised their bids, and wholesale electricity prices briefly climbed above $1,000 per megawatt hour, far higher than the typical $75. In the end, New Yorkers will pay hundreds of millions more than usual because the region lacked sufficient pipeline capacity. Even the state energy plan acknowledges natural gas will remain part of the generation mix for years. If affordability is a priority, adding pipeline capacity is one of the most effective ways to lower bills. Governor Kathy Hochul's approval of the Northeast Supply Enhancement Project is a positive first step and hopefully not the last. And our editorial cartoon today is from Tom Stiglish of Creator Syndicate. It is one frame with the country of Iran looking in the background, totally decimated. And there is someone covered in a hijab, and all you do is see their eyes, and they are holding a peace sign. The statement above is, Iran declares historic victory over U.S. as enemy forced to accept its proposal. And the other cartoon is actually from John Deering of Creator Syndicate. It is one frame. It is a maze of the Strait of Hormuz, and it is President Trump trying to navigate through that maze, and looking like it's impossible or very, very difficult. And our first opinion comes from Froma Harrop of Creator Syndicate. A reminder that Sanders is not a New Yorker. Yes, he talks like a Brooklyn tough guy, but Senator Bernie Sanders is a resident of Vermont, America's most rural and most white state. That he fled New York City nearly 60 years ago seems lost on current Mayor Zoran Mandami and his fellow socialists. Then again, Mandami hasn't been around very long himself. Sanders skipped out of town as part of the white flight leaving New York in the 1960s. Some, like Sanders, were white radicals vexed as losing power to a new generation of black militants who didn't want them dominating the civil rights movement. Having the microphone ripped from their hands, many white activists moved from New York to hip places like Burlington, Vermont. In 1968, Sanders moved to the state's biggest city to join them. Burlington at the time was less than 1% black. It was the perfect place for Sanders to build his political career. Though Sanders is not a New York resident and pays no taxes there, Mandami chose him to preside over his public swearing-in ceremony on the steps of City Hall. That was remarkable for another reason. An out-of-state figure cannot give a binding oath of office unless vested with the state authorized authority. That would explain why Mamdani had New York Attorney General Letitia James administer the official oath at a private midnight gathering. Mamdani is not running New York as a complex urban civilization built over decades, but as a star turned for himself and comrades. Many New Yorkers worried that he's a socialist or worse, a communist. They should take comfort in knowing that the city's sad finances will stop the more radical ideas from materializing. There are still no free buses, no city-run food stores, police still respond to mental health crises, and chances that the state will let him raise taxes on millionaires are slim. The fact that Mamdani is totally out of his depths in mastering New York's complexities has its advantages. The argument can be made that Sanders is an exciting speaker, but that doesn't always work. In 2024, Sanders held a rally for Representative Jamal Bowman in the South Bronx. The South Bronx happened to be on the other end of the borough from Bowman's district. However, the neighborhood, long known for its poverty, served as a useful stage set for Sanders and for Bowman, a member of the left-wing squad. Bowman had earned some fame for setting off a fire alarm in a house office building when he thought no one was watching, and his obscenity-filled rant in the South Bronx seemed an exercise in slumming. Representative Richie Torres, who does represent the area, posted the Bowman's tirade remotely resembles the decency of the people I know and represent in the South Bronx. In the end, Bowman lost the Democratic primary to Westchester County Executive George Latimer, who won in the general. That year, Donald Trump defeated Kamala Harris to win a second term. Sanders was also on that Vermont ballot, vying for another term as senator. But Vermonters seemed less enthusiastic about Sanders than the New York left. He won re-election, but after getting fewer votes in his own state than Harris did. Slogans, TikToks, and celebrities from elsewhere may work at times, but voters who deeply relate to the place they live may be far harder sell. They should be.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is approximately 9:30, and we will go. The time is approximately 30 minutes past the hour. We will now go to our second opinion piece. It is by George Skelton, who's from the Los Angeles Times. Trump's cries over cheating on mail-in ballots defy logic. Why would an immigrant living here illegally risk jail and deportation by trying to vote? That has always puzzled me. And why would a political pro waste time and money soliciting votes from non-citizens when there are millions of legal voters available to persuade? The answer is that undocumented immigrants don't, and neither do campaign consultants. President Trump and MAGA Republicans who echo his diatribe are hallucinating or outright lying when they claim without evidence that there's widespread fraud in American elections, specifically in blue states such as California that vote for Democrats. Trump reiterated the fabrication last week when he signed an executive order seeking to place tight federal controls on increasingly popular mail-in voting. Mail-in voting means mail-in cheating, Trump reiterated. Cheating on mail-in voting is legendary. It's horrible what's going on. See you in court, California Governor Gavin Newsom replied. California and several states partnered in filing a lawsuit accusing the president of an illegal power grab. They pointed out that states have a constitutional right to administer elections pretty much as they see fit. Trump hypocritically voted by mail himself in a recent Florida special election. You know what? Because I'm president of the United States, he told reporters when asked about the vote, I had a lot of different things to do. For him, voting by mail was convenient. For the rest of us, apparently in Trump's mind, we don't do anything important enough to warrant handy mail voting. The reality is that egotistical Trump still can't admit that he lost the 2020 presidential election to Joe Biden fair and square. Democrats must have cheated, he thinks, or says he does. The main way Democrats cheat, Trump and his followers assert, is to round up non-citizens and register them to vote, especially immigrants from Latin America. It's nonsensical. As if some undocumented immigrant struggling to survive and dodge ICE agents really gives a rat who's elected governor or senator. Voting fraudulently is a crime, a misdemeanor or a felony, punishable by a steep fine and or jail time. And a campaign pro is going to break the law by offering cash or groceries to a non-citizen for her vote? That would be felony stupid. We can't get Latinos who have been here legally for 3 generations to vote. If you're going to spend money getting votes, that's where you're going to spend it, says Republican consultant Mike Madrid, who has written a book about Latino political influence. The notion that Democratic operatives are going after undocumented immigrants is absurd. People who migrated here illegally, Madrid adds, don't want to touch the government in any shape or form. They just want to put in a hard day's work and retreat to the shadows. They couldn't care less about politics and voting in the United States. No hard evidence of significant election fraud in America in recent years has been produced by Trump or anyone else. Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco, a leading Republican candidate for governor, apparently was trying to impress Trump and win his endorsement by seizing more than 650,000 ballots cast in November's Proposition 50 election. The sheriff said he was investigating claims, unsubstantiated, of election fraud, but the project is now on hold. A good place for it. It was a waste of the sheriff's resources to collect the ballots and would be an even bigger misuse of personnel and money to sift through all of those documents in a fruitless search for fraud. I called Assemblywoman Gail Pellerin, a Democrat who was Santa Cruz County's chief elections official for 27 years. She chairs the Assembly Election Committee. In all those years supervising elections, Pellerin told me, she encountered only one clear case of fraud. A landlord snatched a ballot that had been mailed to a tenant and illegally cast it. But a voter must sign the envelope containing a mailed ballot, and the landlord's signature didn't match the intended voters as given when she officially registered. Election officials contacted the intended voter, who said she hadn't received her ballot yet. The landlord was prosecuted and convicted. Signatures are checked with the use of technology in California. Pellerin says her own signature didn't match up once. I got sloppy and my signature had changed since I registered 20 years earlier. She was contacted by an elections official and her ballot ultimately was counted. In every election, she says, there are cases of a mother signing the ballot for a daughter who's away at college, or someone signing for an aging parent. The signatures invariably don't match, and the voters are contacted. But that's about the extent of so-called cheating, she said. When voters register, they must answer under penalty of perjury whether they're a citizen. Trump's convoluted intervention in state-operated voting would, among other things, direct the U.S. Postal Service to design new envelopes with barcodes that verify voter legality. The feds would refuse to send ballots to people deemed ineligible to cast them. Gosh, what could possibly go wrong under the Trump administration? Californians have embraced mail-in voting. In the gubernatorial election 40 years ago, only 9% of ballots were cast by mail. 20 years ago, 42% were, and in November it was up to 89%. But baseless claims by Trump and his grovelers of cheating will persist. It fires up the conservative base and raises political money. It also maligns non-citizens and dedicated election officials who keep voting fraud-free.
And our next opinion comes from Kathleen Parker of the Washington Post. Trump's latest NATO tantrums bring back ghosts from 2003. President Trump's latest tantrums against NATO remind us that toddlers love repetition. Trump has threatened to pull out of the transatlantic alliance so many times it's become, well, a joke. He recently called America's European allies cowards for refusing to raise to his command and seize the Strait of Hormuz. All of this is because Trump and Israel decided to bomb Iran for reasons that vary from day to day. Remember when Trump said last June that the U.S. had totally destroyed Iran's ability to create nukes? False. Well, now he says Iranian nukes remained imminent, false, and that America has already achieved victory through regime change, even though the war is in its third month with ground troops headed to the region. The Strait of Hormuz, which carries about 1/5 of the world's oil, remains mostly closed. Meanwhile, gas prices keep climbing as market volatility increases. Secretary of State Colin Powell's words to George W. Bush before U.S. invasion of Iraq haunt us once again. If you break it, you own it. Saddam Hussein didn't have weapons of mass destruction and stated rationale for taking the war on terror to Iraq. The lack of a plan for the day after shock and awe proved a disaster, the effects of which persist. With Operation Epic Fury, the U.S. has broken its fragile stalemate with Iran and now owns it. What's next? Few would disagree that Saddam was a horrible human being who deserved to be toppled, though perhaps not by America then. The same can be said of Iran's brutal leadership, but how and when might this end? Shortly, very shortly, Trump said on April 1, with or without a deal. Still, the assumption that the Iranian people will take over their country once the U.S. has killed all the bad guys seems as much a pipe dream as when Bush expected the Iraqi people to welcome Americans with flowers while dancing in the street. Well, the Iranians did dance. We'll give Trump that. Trump bombed Iran not long after inaugurating the Board of Peace, which he helms. At least Bush organized a coalition of the willing, weak though it was, in advance of the U.S. invasion of Iraq. You didn't see NATO jumping into that mighty fray either. Only Britain and Poland and Australia contributed troops to the invasion force, though other countries aided later. Trump thought he and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu could manage the fiasco they've created until now. Suddenly, Trump wants European allies he spent years insulting to join a war he started without a clear plan, or apparently any idea that decapitating Iran's leadership would instigate a regional crisis and risk millions of lives. At least 3 NATO allies have told Trump in so many words to take a flying leap. Italy denied landing rights for U.S. aircraft en route to the Middle East, with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni calling the war outside the scope of international law. Spain announced that it was closing its airspace and 2 military bases to U.S. operations related to the Iran campaign. Spanish Defense Minister Margarita Robles noted that though this move doesn't signify a break in transatlantic relations, 2 countries went to war and expected us to join them. Trump, though he surely knows that NATO's purpose is to offer defense aid when one of its 32 member countries is attacked, threatened to cut off trade with terrible Spain. He also criticized France for refusing to allow the transport of military supplies to Israel through its airspace. Secretary of State Marco Rubio nevertheless parroted the president's threat to take a hard look at NATO's value once the fighting stops. Thanks for the chuckles, Marco, but it seems that NATO is the one taking a hard look at America's value. At least some good has come from Trump's foot-stomping petulance. Europe has begun focusing on developing its own military defenses rather than leaning so heavily on U.S. power. This has been the crux of Trump's criticisms all along. If he prevails in Iran, democracy flourishes, and Hezbollah and Hamas flash a peace sign after the ground group hug, I'll stand corrected. But it seems just as likely that Trump and Netanyahu could find themselves at The Hague for war crimes.
And now we'll go to our business page. Sneaky ways companies are raising prices due to Iran war. After weeks of war-driven pressure on fuel prices and supply chains, some businesses are starting to pass those higher costs along to consumers via new fees or through other, less obvious changes. Companies tend to look for ways to get more out of what they already have. Higher costs still show up in subtle ways like higher free shipping minimums, fewer discounts, smaller package sizes, or slower delivery. Jet fuel is one of the biggest inputs for airlines, accounting for around 25% of costs. In the United States, it has spiked by 90% since the war began. Additionally, due to closures at some Middle East airports, some airlines are having to take longer routes, requiring more fuel. For now, here's where customers are seeing breakout fuel surcharges. From Amazon. Amazon announced a temporary 3.5% fuel and logistics-related surcharge for third-party sellers that use their shipping and return services, going into effect later this month. Amazon said last year that these sellers have shipped more than 80 billion products using its fulfillment services. A company spokesperson did not specify what criteria would need to be met before the surcharge could be removed, but said it would be in place for the foreseeable future. In order to offset that surcharge, some sellers may opt to raise prices, but shoppers on the site aren't currently being hit directly with a fuel surcharge. From the airlines. The airline JetBlue announced last week it would be raising its fees for checked baggage. They've increased by between $4 and $9 depending on flight times. The cost of one checked bag has increased from $35 to $39 during off-peak times and $40 to $49 for flights during peak times. The JetBlue spokesperson tied the charge directly to rising operating costs, adding that the fee for the optional service prevents the airline from raising overall fares. The spokesperson did not indicate if the fee was temporary. For United Airlines, they also announced an increasing cost of checked baggage. The airline started on April 3rd, charging $10 extra for the first and second pieces of luggage, raising the price to $45 for the first and $55 for the second. The United States Postal Service on March 25th said it is implementing its first ever fuel surcharge on packages, inciting increased transportation costs. The 8% surcharge is temporary and will only apply to packages, not letter mail, according to a release from the United States Postal Service. Consumers and businesses will start seeing the fee on April 26th. The United States Postal Service said the surcharge will remain in place until at least January 17, 2027, at which time it will determine if a different long-term approach is needed. UPS, FedEx, and other shippers. Long before the war with Iran, UPS, FedEx, and other major shipping companies have had automatic fuel charges that kick in when fuel prices hit a certain threshold. For instance, a fuel surcharge of 21.5% kicks in for FedEx Ground and home deliveries when diesel prices hit at least $3.55 a gallon. As of April 6, FedEx charged a 26.5% surcharge, which is based on the national average for a gallon of diesel for the week prior, as posted by the U.S. Energy Information Administration. Shippers like Maersk have also tacked on additional fees.
Federal meteorologists say it was the hottest record in 132 years. That was March of this year. March's persistent, unseasonable heat was so intense that the continental United States registered its most abnormal hot month in 132 years of records, according to federal weather data. Not only was it the hottest March on record for the U.S., but the amount it was above normal beat any other month in history for the lower 48 states. March's average temperature of 50.85 degrees was 9.35 Fahrenheit above the 20th century normal for March. That easily passed the old record of 8.9 Fahrenheit set in March of 2012 as the most abnormally hot month on record, regardless of the month of the year, according to records released Wednesday by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The average maximum temperature for March was especially high at 11.4 Fahrenheit, above the 20th century average, and was almost a degree warmer than the average daytime high for April. 6 of the nation's top 10 most abnormally hot months have been in the past 10 years. This February, which was 6.57 Fahrenheit above 20th century normal, was the 10th highest above normal. One reason that it's so concerning is that just sheer volume of records, all-time records that were set and broken during this time period, but also that this is coming on the heels of what was the worst snow year and the hottest winter of record. April 2025 to March 2026 was the warmest 12-month period on record in the continental United States. On March 20th and 21st, about 1/3 of the nation felt unseasonable heat that would have been virtually impossible without human-caused climate change. More than 19,800 daily temperature records were broken for heat across the country. More than 2,000 places set monthly records for heat, harder to break than daily records. That's more March heat records set just last month than in entire decades in the past. All those broken records tells us that climate change is kicking our butts, said a meteorologist at Yale Climate Connections.
As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, call us at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555. Baranowski, Sylvia, Franz Lawrence Werner, he's PhD. Hinckley Philip C. O'Brien Joseph Robert. Taylor James W. Weichel Evelyn. Wilson Sarah J. Nee Rowe, nicknamed Sally. Also, Craig Reedy, internationally, Craig Reedy, the former World Anti-Doping Agency president, whose position on the Russian doping scandal a decade ago brought him into conflict with the IOC, where he was a vice president. He has died. He was 84. Reedy played key roles in London's unexpected win in bidding to host the 2012 Olympics, excuse me, and in getting his own sport, badminton, onto the Olympic program for the 1992 Barcelona Games. Reedy's standing in Olympic politics helped to elevate him to lead the global anti-doping watchdog in 2013. 3 years later, the lead-in to the Rio de Janeiro Summer Games was dominated by the scandal of learning the scale of Russia's state-backed doping program at the 2014 Sochi Winter Games. The push by Reedy to remove the entire Russian team from Rio was fiercely resisted by the IOC and its president, Thomas Bach. The public pressure put on Reedy by influential Olympic figures continued for months until he and Bach met to clear the air. Since Rio, no Russian team has competed at an Olympics with its own country flag, name, and anthem. If you need any further information on any of these names, please call us at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555.
And now let's see what the stars have in store for us. Happy birthday for Thursday, April 9th. You are competent, practical, energetic, and focused. You have a strong drive and strength of purpose. This year, exciting changes will bring you increased personal freedom. Stay flexible. And remember, each day has a star value. 5 stars dynamic, 4 positive, 3 average, 2 so-so, 1 difficult. Aries, a 5-star day. Today, your ruler, fiery Mars, enters your sign, introducing a 6-week window of increased activity and a chance to further your own interests. Tonight, you're admired. Taurus, 3 stars. For the next 6 weeks, Mars will be hiding in your chart, which can be challenging. You might be frustrated and feel resigned to be in the background. Tonight, explore. Gemini, a 4-star day. You're entering a lovely 6-week window that's the perfect time to formulate your goals and actively pursue them. You can work successfully with others, especially if you coordinate your needs with theirs. Tonight, check your finances. Cancer, a 5-star day. Holy cannelloni. Today, fiery Mars moves to the top of your chart and stays there for the next 6 weeks, arousing your ambition as never before. Tonight, cooperate. Leo, another 5-star day. Exciting news. For the next 6 weeks, you'll be more intellectually creative with goals related to writing, publishing, exploring new ideas, and traveling. Tonight, get busy. Virgo, 3-star day. In the next 6 weeks, you might encounter confrontations about shared property, taxes, debt, insurance issues, or inheritances. Tonight, socialize. Libra, a 3-star day. Tread carefully in the next 6 weeks because fiery Mars is opposite your sign. This happens approximately every 2 years. Tonight, family time. Scorpio, a 4-star day. You'll be surprised at how productive you'll be in the next 6 weeks. Fiery Mars will help you accomplish whatever you want to do, especially at work. Tonight, conversations. Sagittarius, another 5-star day. The planet Mars symbolizes our ego, and in the next 6 weeks, you'll demand to be yourself and express yourself exactly how you want. Tonight, take care of your possessions. Capricorn, a 4-star day. You can expect increased activity, even chaos, on the home front for the next 6 weeks, perhaps due to guests, moves, or renovations. Tonight, you are strong. Aquarius, a 5-star day. The everyday tempo of your life will accelerate in the next 6 weeks. You have things to do, places to go, and people to see. Tonight, enjoy solitude. And Pisces, a 3-star day. You'll work hard to boost your income in the next 6 weeks. You also might find that you seem to identify more strongly with your wealth, your assets, and things that you own. Tonight, you're admired.
And Pat just read the article about March and the heat wave. And she did say that that these changes would be virtually impossible without human-caused climate change, the Climate Central calculated. And the meteorologist from Yale Climate Connection said that all these broken records tells us that climate change is kicking our butts. We have another small article that is directly opposite that. Zeldin, climate skeptics should celebrate repeal. The head of the Environmental Protection Agency defended his decision Wednesday to repeal the legal determination that serves as the basis for federal rules to slow climate change, telling a gathering of climate change skeptics they should celebrate vindication. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin made the remarks in a keynote address at a conference hosted by the Heartland Institute, a conservative think tank that rejects mainstream climate science and what it calls climate alarmism. Zeldin told the gathering that the repeal of the 2009 endangerment finding reversed decades of adherence to liberal politicians and environmental groups about the dangers of climate change. Today is a moment to celebrate. It is a day to celebrate vindication, said Zeldin, a former Republican congressman from New York who is widely believed to be under consideration for a promotion to Attorney General. The EPA earlier this year revoked the endangerment finding, a scientific conclusion that for 16 years was the central basis for regulating planet-warming emissions from power plants, vehicles, and other sources. You're listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for April 9th, Thursday, on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your readers today are
Pat Lamont
and Ruth Nowotniak.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
We'll continue now with the reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News. Your readers today are
Ruth Nowotniak.
and Pat Lamont, and we will see what's happening in the city and region. Council impressed by nominee to lead Buffalo Police Department. Common Council members had only a brief opportunity to talk to Erica Shields, Mayor Sean Ryan Spick, to lead the Buffalo Police Department after he announced his candidate. But she made a good first impression. Members who spoke to the news on Tuesday said they met with Shields, the former police chief in Louisville and Atlanta, who Ryan tapped to run his department, talking with her for about 30 minutes after she was introduced. They liked what she had to say about training requirements, connecting with diverse communities, but will need more time to look into her previous work and ask her more about her outlook for Buffalo before they decide whether they will support her confirmation. Niagara Council member David Rivera, a former Buffalo police detective who chairs the council's police oversight committee, said he spent time reminiscing about their respective police careers and asking several general questions during his time with her. We'd like to spend more time with her, kind of dig a little deeper, Rivera said. Shields, who works for a law enforcement training technology firm, resigned from her last two posts. In Atlanta, she worked her way up from being an officer to their top spot, serving as chief of police from 2016 to 2020. She resigned after an Atlanta officer shot and killed Rashad Brooks, who had a confrontation with officers who were called to a Wendy's restaurant because Brooks had fallen asleep in his car and was blocking the drive-through lane. Brooks engaged in conversation with the officers for about 40 minutes, and they administered sobriety tests. When the officers tried to arrest him, he took one of their tasers and discharged it before running away. After he discharged it a second time while running, an officer shot him twice in the back, and he later died at a hospital, according to news reports from the time. The killing in Atlanta came weeks after the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, with protests and demands for police reform happening in cities across the country, including Buffalo. The Georgia NCAAP called for Shields' resignation shortly after video of the killing was shared publicly, and she stepped down the next day. A special prosecutor appointed to review the killing of Brooks decided not to pursue criminal charges against the officers, saying they acted reasonably in a quickly evolving situation. In Louisville, where she was chief of police from 2021 to 2023, Shields resigned after a new mayor won election, as is typical when new administrations take over City Hall. Council Majority Leader Leah Halton Pope said she has heard from several constituents concerned with the circumstances surrounding the resignations, but that she will reserve judgment until she has an opportunity to read more about the details and ask Shields directly. There's still a process for any commissioner, she said. The council still has to approve them. Council President pro tempore Zanetta Everhart has been a leading advocate for gun violence prevention since joining the council in 23. She said she did not have an opportunity to talk with Shields on that topic, but plans to ask her about her philosophy on violence prevention. That is always at the top of my list, she said. She said she was impressed by Shields' focus on training. Obviously, that's a conversation we have a lot here in the city of Buffalo, which is something that is needed, said Everhart. If she is confirmed, Shields would be the first woman to hold the post and the first commissioner not promoted from within the department ranks since Gil Korlikowski was brought in under former Mayor Anthony Masiello in 1994. Halton Pope said that the qualifications will matter above all else, but that as the first woman of color to hold the position of council majority leader, it would be great to break that barrier if the council decides she is right for the job. Time will only tell where we stand, Halton Pope said. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with her. Ryan hopes to have Shields confirmed by early May. If the council approves her hire, she will take over for interim Commissioner Craig Macy, the former chief of detectives at the department who came out of retirement to serve while the city conducted a national search for his replacement. We're looking forward to vetting it a little bit more, Rivera said, but overall, I was impressed with her.
Eminger plans to step down as Tonawanda Town Supervisor, and this is written by Stephen Watson, who's a news staff reporter. Joseph Eminger will end 20 years in the town of Tonawanda government when he resigns as supervisor next month. Eminger, 66, has served as supervisor of the town of 71,000 since 2016, and prior to that spent a decade as a town board member. He's in his third term as town supervisor and was barred by Tonawanda's term limits law, which he voted for as a new board member, from running for re-election. His term ends through the end of 2027. Eminger declined to get into specifics on what he said were the personal reasons for his decision to leave office 19 months early, but he said he is in good health and he isn't seeking another political post. It's just time to get the next generation of leadership to come into town and build on what we have done over the last 15 to 20 years, he said in an interview. Eminger revealed his decision on Wednesday morning. He said he told Tonawanda Town Board members, department heads, and town employees a short time before issuing his public announcement. Once he leaves office, the town board will appoint someone to serve as supervisor through the end of the year. The other 4 board members, all Democrats, likely will follow the recommendation of the Town Democratic Committee. A special election will be held in November to fill the final year of Eminger's term. He's always done the right thing for the town, Town Democratic Chair John Krangle said. He's done it with integrity and honesty. And one thing, when Joe Eminger was your supervisor, you never had to worry about a scandal or somebody doing something wrong. Eminger, a town of Tonawanda native, operated a real estate appraisal firm for many years until retiring in 2024. He was initially elected to the town board in 2005, part of the board's first Democratic majority in the modern era. He was reelected in 2009 and 2013. He succeeded Anthony Caruana as town supervisor, winning election in 2015 and re-election by comfortable margins in 2019 and 23. When he was running for re-election 3 years ago, he said he intended to serve out his third term, but he recently concluded stepping down was in the best interests of his family and the town. It's a 24/7 job, 365 days a year, and I'm going to be honest with you, it does wear on you. And there are no vacations, Eminger said. I've been out of town at the Grand Canyon on vacation, getting calls where I had to deal with town business. I've been in Las Vegas on vacation. There are no vacations or no weekends. I'm texting and emailing people 7 days a week. As supervisor, Eminger took on numerous financial, developmental, and environmental challenges. The revival of the former Huntley Generation Station has taken the full length of Eminger's time as supervisor. At his State of the Town address in February, Eminger said he expected the town to take control of the riverfront parcel through eminent domain this year. The reuse of the former Tonawanda Coke plant, once the country's worst polluter, has moved faster. Developer John Williams last month filed plans to build a large data center on the property's main parcel. The town in recent years launched a municipal ambulance corps, though scaled back from its initial plans for the program, and led an expansion of recreation facilities at the former Brighton Park and other town sites. Brighton Park is now Paddock Park following a naming rights agreement with the auto dealer. We have to look at non-conventional ways to raise revenue because we can't put everything on the back of the taxpayers, Eminger said. Deputy Supervisor Gina Santamaria also pointed to progress on a planned system to carry raw water to industrial customers along the Niagara River and on the redevelopment of a landfill to a proposed Cherry Farm Park. So much of the town right now has his stamp on it. There are projects that he's worked on for the whole time that he's been here, and now they're all coming to fruition. So it's a great thing to see, Santa Maria said. He leaves a huge mark on the town.
First Station 12 shops slated for October opening. The developer behind the long-delayed Station 12 retail project in Amherst marked the literal high point of the project Wednesday, lifting the final beam in place on one of two new buildings in a future open-air plaza that will each have rooftop patios. The construction milestone and ongoing work on the Sheridan Drive site illustrates the significant progress being made on the project after years of stop-starts and delays since it was first announced 10 years ago. 3 buildings are essentially complete, with 2 more underway and work set to begin on a 6th. But none are fully built out for tenants or occupied yet, even after the host of new tenants have been announced in the recent months. The first store openings are expected on or about October 15th, with additional openings occurring on a rolling basis through the December holiday season. In all, between 55 and 60 tenants will occupy the entire Station 12 plaza, which also includes the existing Whole Foods and at-home stores on the eastern end. We're really excited to be here today and more excited about everything to come, said David Sturgeon, Vice President of Development for Boston-based WS Development. There's a lot more to come as we continue to bring new business to Buffalo and the region. Even the town of Amherst, which has complained about and criticized the slow pace of the project, which was previously forced the developer to finish the earlier buildings than it had started, joined the parade of praise. We are excited to see this project come to fruition. After years of anticipation, we are now seeing construction progress daily, Councilmember Michael Sukala said. We are excited about the retail spaces and restaurants that are new to the area and know that this will be a huge attraction to town residents as well as visitors. This development will be an economic booster that will benefit Amherst for years to come. It's been a long time coming. The project, which was unveiled in 2015, saw significant movement at first with the demolition of the former Northtown Plaza, construction of Whole Foods Market, and the start of construction on new buildings. Ruth?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was really into that article.
You're looking forward to going
I
shopping.
was looking for...
Another new place to shop.
You figured me out, Pat.
A5.
A5. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Pat.
That's okay.
I think we have time for the break. Do you want to do the break?
Yeah, we can go to the break.
Okay.
And in the meantime, we're going to see what's happening in the sports world. And we will start with the Red Hot Sabres. How Dahlin balance fiancé's health and hockey. Rasmus Dahlin had to be reminded of what being named as a nominee for the Bill Masterson Memorial Trophy meant. The Buffalo Sabres captain initially had no idea what the award represented. He is, however, an embodiment of it this season. The defenseman is the Sabres nominee for the Masterton Trophy, which is given to the player who best exemplifies the qualities of perseverance, sportsmanship, and dedication to hockey. The Buffalo chapter of the Professional Hockey Writers Association nominated Dahlin, and the PHWA announced the 32 nominees, one from each NHL team, Wednesday. Dahlin has led the Sabres to their first playoff berth since 2011, and he's maintained his standing as one of NHL's top defensemen as his fiancée, Carolina Matovac, continues to recover after she received a heart transplant in the summer of 2025. It hasn't been an easy year, Dahlen said after the Sabres morning skate at Madison Square Garden ahead of the game Wednesday against the New York Rangers. But I've got good teammates that have helped me, especially Bo and Sammy, Bo Byram and Matthias Samuelsson. So they've been there my whole time. Dahlen revealed his fiance's heart transplant at training camp in September, which came after Madovic had heart failure during a summer vacation in France and was placed on life support before receiving a new heart. Madovic underwent months of rehabilitation in Sweden, and Dahlen took 2 separate leaves of absence during the season to return to Sweden to be with her as she continues to recovery. She revealed in a social media post in January that she had lost a pregnancy and that the loss of a child ultimately alerted her to go to the hospital where she was diagnosed with heart failure. She traveled to Buffalo last month for the first time since receiving a heart from an organ donor. He entered Wednesday's game against the New York Rangers 6th in scoring among NHL defensemen with 18 goals, 52 assists, and 70 points is plus 12 this season. Sabres defenseman Owen Power has continued to be impressed with the Dahlen ability to balance a high level of competition on the ice with what he has endured this season. Dahlen has been successful this season with the help of support. Coach Lindy Ruff has seen how Dahlen has been able to compartmentalize through the course of the season. Ruff confirmed after the Sabres morning skate that there will be changes on defense, including the possibility that Michael Kesselring will return to the lineup for the first time since March 10th. Kesselring worked with Connor Timmins during the morning skate. Left wing Jordan Greenway participated in the morning skate but wasn't going to play against the Rangers and is scheduled to return to the lineup Thursday when the Sabres host Columbus in the second game of back-to-back games. Tyson Kozak, Josh Dunn, and Tanner Pearson skated for the first line with right wing back Meliston. These last 4 games, these guys want to see play, and part of Jordan is we're not going to play him back-to-back, Ruff said.
We're now doing the Lance Lysowski article, Growing Culture, a Priority for Brady. There's more to building a winning culture in professional sports than plastering motivational phrases around a practice facility, gathering players for a team-building exercise, or delivering rah-rah speeches in the locker room. More often than not, people and accountability separate winners from losers. Joe Brady doesn't have to build a winning culture during his first season as the Buffalo Bills head coach. He inherited one that should be considered among the best in the NFL. But he told reporters last week at the NFL League meeting that he's not going to take it for granted. We're going into year 1, not year 10, and I need the guys to understand that, Brady explained at the AFC coaches breakfast. But you can't assume anything. I can't be like, hey man, Buffalo has had a good culture, we're good. No, we got to start this from ground zero, from the jump, from the start. I want the guys to understand that this is new, we're going to build it. Good answer. The off-season can't be all about X's and O's. Many of the internal head coaching hires in the NFL have struggled because they neglect culture. Brady learned its importance while working under Sean Payton and Sean McDermott, among others. The job began in January when Brady was hired to replace McDermott as the Bills' coach. But the past 10 weeks were spent mostly on building a staff and collaborating with management through free agency. Brady has spoken to players over the phone. Returners on defense heard from him on day 1, and others have been at one Bills drive to recover from injuries or prepare for the 2026 season. But for the most part, the start of the team's voluntary off-season workouts Tuesday was Brady's first opportunity to be around his players. The message Brady planned to deliver will stay between him and the players who were in the building for his opening address Tuesday. It's safe to assume, however, each word was delivered with the energy that we saw during his introductory press conference in January. This is the easy part of the job for Brady. You can't lose a game in April. And during its early stages, the off-season program will focus on strength and conditioning. The challenge gets more difficult in late July with the opening of training camp. Brady, the youngest head coach in the NFL, enters year one with Super Bowl expectations in Western New York. He'll juggle the responsibilities of a CEO with offensive play calling. How will Brady respond when he has to discipline a player? Crisis management is part of the gig. Wisely, Brady surrounded himself with assistant coaches who have a wide array of backgrounds and experience levels. Have a question about how to handle a practice fight between two players? Turn to John Fox, who twice led a team to the Super Bowl as a head coach. Have a question about how to coach a rookie who played college football in the NIL era? Ask cornerbacks coach Jay Vallee or defensive line coach Terrence Jameson, both of whom were at Power 5 programs last season. And don't think for a second that Brady wasn't taking notes on how McDermott navigated challenging situations. Brady is in charge now, though. Everyone will look to him to lead the way, and anyone suggesting he's going to coddle Josh Allen should listen to the nearly hour-long interview Brady conducted at the league meeting. The head coach and franchise quarterback have a plan to hold each other accountable. We're all going to find out how Brady handles everyone else on the roster. He also stated that he has a plan to help young players avoid the tardiness that led wide receiver Keon Coleman to get benched last season. Guiding players through tumultuous or challenging circumstances helped McDermott lead the Bills to the divisional round in 6 consecutive seasons. Unable to practice during the week because of a snowstorm? No problem. But too often McDermott's personality caused his team to play too tight in the most important moments. Spend time with Brady away from the cameras or speak to people who worked with him elsewhere, and you'll understand why that won't happen with him in charge. The Bills have to win to earn those opportunities, though, and Brady lost some important leaders this offseason, particularly on defense. He'll need to create a standard and deliver consistent messaging that won't become stale. I have values that I believe in, and if I'm the only one that believes in it, there's not going to be that buy-in, Brady said. I've had a lot of phone calls with guys trying to meet them, hear them out, and also we do have to grow. It's not just last coach out, Joe Brady in, and business as usual. So I have to continue to grow this culture. And what that looks like is going to be a product of all of us coming together and figuring it out. Losing teams with first-year coaches have the luxury of time. No one is going to expect Raiders head coach Clint Kubiak to build a culture overnight. Brady has to do it immediately because the focus during training camp needs to be between the white lines. Neither he nor Allen are satisfied with how the offense performed in 2025. The defense has a new coordinator, Jim Leonhard, and must adjust to a 3-4-based scheme. Brady won't be alone in creating a standard. The Bills have Allen. They also retained center Connor McGovern and tight end Dawson Knox, two leaders who are widely respected in the team's locker room. On defense, there's Ed Oliver, Bradley Chubb, and Greg Rousseau. Christian Benford isn't loud, but he leads by example. There are several others like him. However, the off-season program is important regardless of whether a team has a new coach or not. And the next several weeks are an invaluable opportunity for Brady to set the right tone for a team that has to win in year one.
We'll be watching.
Yes.
Bulls on parade. The Buffalo Bulls coaching staff, returning players, and even former players have all gleamed at the mention of UB's 26th freshman class. It is early, of course, but they have their reason to do so. Bulls coach Pete Lambeau secured what one rating service deemed best recruiting class in program history this winter, and 10 freshmen from that class are with the team in spring practice, including highly rated edge rusher Malachi Irvin, of Pinkerton, Ohio, and linebacker Narad Jarvis of Chesapeake, Virginia. According to 247 Sports, UB's 2026 class ranked 95th in the nation. On 3, placed Buffalo's class 107th out of 194 ranked teams. That doesn't look like much of a first glance, but go a little deeper and you'll understand why the Bulls were so quick to trumpet their latest group of freshmen. UB freshman class ranks 3rd among Mid-American Conference teams in 247 Sports total points rankings. But those points are based in part on the number of players a team signs. And while the Bulls signed 20 players, other teams piled up more points because they signed more players. Top-rated Bowling Green signed 27 players. Second-rate Northern Illinois signed 32. But perhaps more importantly, 247 Sports' average composite player grade for UB's class, 84.34, is the highest in program history. Well, first of all, it's really good propaganda, right? Lembo said, laughing. The work starts now that they're here. 10 of them are here, and another chunk of them will be here in June. But what I would first say is they're great guys from great families, and that's what we look for. It's always about the character and the values to start, and the 10 guys that have already enrolled, which is a really high number, have acclimated themselves so well. Though through 2 weeks of spring ball, what has been noticeable is the physical size and work ethic of UB's 2026 class. It is too early to tell how much any of them will contribute when the Bulls season kicks off September 3rd against Albany at newly renamed Broadview Stadium. But UB's early enrolled freshmen have been busy receiving essential reps during spring practice, which began March 25th and culminates with the Bulls' spring game on April 25th. UB has 5 freshmen who are ranked in the program's top 25 all-time recruits, according to 247 Sports. Lambeau attributed that to the combination of their productivity and background from strong high school programs. Though Lambeau declined to go into specifics, he was clear that each of his 4 freshman linebackers and 3 edge rushers are practicing in spring ball. Matt Heininger, Jarvis, Garbolino, and Witherspoon have shared snaps with graduate Savon Brown and other veteran linebackers. Irvin Lunsford and Anderson have played the edge with sophomore Will Clark during 11-on-11s. The video speaks for itself, Lambeau said. The athletic ability speaks for itself, but the most important thing to me is they're the right kind of guys to come to UB. Red Murdoch, Buffalo's latest All-American linebacker who is now preparing for the NFL draft, said he is not only excited about the 2026 class of linebackers, he also complimented last year's linebacker class featuring redshirt freshman Thomas Barr and the 2024 class with third-year sophomore Drake Saltarelli. Well, good luck to them. It looks like it's going to be a good year for them.
Yep.
So, cheer on, everybody. And you are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 29 minutes after the hour. And let's see what kind of advice Eric is providing today. Dear Eric, my 50-year-old daughter has a host of diagnoses that my husband and I are trying to navigate. We are receiving service and advice from a psychiatrist, a therapist, an occupational therapist, and a speech therapist. My problem is that I am constantly receiving rude comments and unwanted advice about my daughter. These fall into 2 main categories: questioning her medication and offering other comments on her behaviors. How do I politely tell people that their comments are rude and that I do not wish the conversation to continue. The issue is mostly with visitors coming to my house and us visiting relatives who are not aware of our day-to-day lives. My daughter's pills are in the bathroom, so she remembers to take them, and I've had visitors saying things like, "That's a lot of medication, and she seems out of it, don't you think?" I recently visited my sister out of state, and she was adamant that we address one of my daughter's behaviors in a particular way, even though we assured her it was already being addressed. As a parent of a child with a lot of challenges, how do I tell these people that caring for my daughter is exhausting? My husband and I both work full time, and that we need their support, not their criticism. A fed-up mom. Dear Mom, I'm sorry you're having to deal with these comments, even if well-intentioned. This kind of unsolicited feedback can be extremely frustrating and even hurtful. It may help you to head it off at the pass by bringing it up before guests come over or before your next visit to someone else. You can be transparent about saying, "You may notice my daughter's medication in the bathroom. People sometimes bring it up. I want to ask that you do not do that. We're in very good hands medically, and we want to keep all feedback to our care team." This sets an expectation for guests in your home and can help them direct any instinct they might have to offer suggestions. Similarly, when visiting, you might try to preview what could happen in advance. I know that you may not know what will happen, but again, you can reference past situations. Sometimes my daughter does sample behavior, and others have found it frustrating, inappropriate, or whatever description you feel is best. This isn't something she's fully in control of, and we are working to get her the help she needs. I'm telling you in advance because I want our visit to be a success, and I want to ask for your patience and your grace. Then ask them if they have any questions and give them suggestions for how they might respond in a helpful way. It's fine if the ideal response is for them to ignore it. Dear Eric, my ex was always bad with money. Credit card bills, collection agency calls, gambling issues. You name it. We were together for 10 years right out of college, and now we've been apart for about 5. My credit card is almost black to something respectable, but my bank account sure isn't. But I'm doing okay. He's not doing so well, though, surprise, surprise. He's got a chance to take a job that will pay him well, but it's a long commute and he doesn't have a car. He asked me to co-sign his loan with him. I want to help him get on his feet, but I'm not sure if this is the right way. What do you think? Bad credit. Dear credit, absolutely not. I'm so sorry, but he needs to come up with a different plan. From your telling me he still has a fraught relationship with money and bills, so he may not even be in a position to responsibly manage a car payment. Looping yourself into that scenario is only going to create more financial and emotional issues for you. There may be a part of you that thinks if you do enough for him, you can fix him or help him fix himself. This is not your fault, but it is something you should address. Even if you're still good friends, you're also exes, and so you need to draw the boundary between the two of you. One place to start is Melody Beattie's book, Codependent No More: How to Stop Controlling Others and Start Caring for Yourself. If you still feel compelled to make this easier for your ex, consider helping him look for financial counseling or reputable, non-predatory debt relief services, or helping him brainstorm other ways of getting to work. Is public transportation an option? Can he get a ride from coworkers? There are other ways of providing support should you feel compelled that don't get reported to credit bureaus.
And our first life feature. Rudy's deference to Trump stirs concern in Europe, and this is a Bloomberg News analysis article. In NATO's glass and steel corridors, calls and texts were coming in from European governments. Mark Rutte needs to tone it down. This isn't our war. Less than 48 hours earlier, on February 28th, European leaders had watched in shock as the U.S. and Israel pummeled Iran without consulting their allies. Across the continent, leaders anxiously braced for chaos and economic calamity. Yet there was the NATO chief on TV, championing Trump's decision and saying that Europe was extremely glad. It wasn't. In fact, European allies are starting to question whether Rutte's deferential approach to Trump, which at times turns into political cheerleading, is appropriate or even working, according to people familiar with the matter. Despite Rutte's ability to connect with Trump, the president has cut aid to Ukraine, boosted Russia's finances, and sent the global economy reeling with his war in Iran. There is also concern that Rutte's Iran war bullishness may have caused Trump to expect NATO would back him, one of the people said. Meanwhile, NATO, the world's largest military alliance, has never been on such shaky ground, with Trump repeatedly questioning its relevance, menacing its members, and threatening to withdraw just last week. On Wednesday, Rutte was at the White House on yet another NATO rescue mission, arriving shortly after Trump announced a 2-week ceasefire with Iran to allow for negotiations. At stake with the meeting is not just NATO, but Europe's position in the world. With doubts growing about U.S. commitment to NATO, Europe is trying to prepare for a military and economic reality it hasn't confronted since before World War II. The U.S. refusing to defend its allies. I'm sorry. It's exactly what enemies of the U.S. and Europe want to see, said Oana Lugasso, NATO's former spokesperson, who's now with the Royal United Services Institute, a defense think tank. It's a dream come true for Russia and China. Rutte is trying to be a NATO leader for the Trump age. The NATO chief eschews typical bureaucratic channels and speaks directly to Trump, sometimes by phone, sometimes by giving interviews to TV channels he knows Trump and his inner circle will be watching. In public, Rutte mirrors Trump's talking points, lavishes the president with praise, and even repeats Trumpian phrases. The approach has won Rutte privileged access to Trump among European leaders, according to the People, although others, such as Italy's Giorgia Meloni and Finland's Alexander Stubb, are also friendly with the president. Rutte and Trump text and call each other frequently, the People said. This back channel has given Rutte a way to privately nudge Trump. Rutte may have helped talk Trump down from his push to acquire Greenland, a Danish territory, the People said. And he crafted a more realistic way for allies to meet Trump's demanded funding boost, allowing them to combine core military spending with defense-related expenditures. In return, European leaders have given Rutte considerable leeway to operate. One official described the flattery as a price worth paying to keep NATO together in a tense global moment. The tactic, the official said, recognizes that Trump often changes his mind and buys Europe time to build up its own militaries. Eastern European countries in particular are keen to keep the U.S. engaged as a counterweight to Russia and applaud Rutte's strategy. Even the NATO leader's critics say the approach may be the best of several bad options. The way he operates is to keep the dialogue channel open, absorb some of the shocks from D.C., and use that as a platform that all allies can meet from, Languso said. But red lines are being drawn. Europeans, especially in the West, have in recent months started to sour on the Trump appeasement strategy more broadly, seeing benefits from simply saying no. And some officials have not appreciated moments when they felt Rutte was almost taking Trump's side against Europe. The concern, the People said, is that Rutte's approach may undermine Europe's own position toward the U.S. Spain, for instance, sees Rudy as occasionally too aligned with Washington, and some senior officials privately describing him as Trump's lackey, a perception Rudy fueled by branding Trump NATO's daddy. Madrid was the lone dissenting voice on Rudy's Trump-pleasing push to jump NATO members' defense spending. NATO didn't reply to a request for comment for this piece. The war in Iran has yanked these backroom tensions into the spotlight. Rudy's overt boisterism for the U.S.-Israeli attacks has been particularly at odds with the sentiment among most NATO members. Even the UK, which largely supports Rudy's conciliatory tactics, thought the Secretary General went too far. Rudy wasn't just supporting the war, he was encouraging Americans to do so, essentially straying into domestic politics, historically off limits for NATO leaders. I've seen the polling, but I really hope the American people will be with him, Rudy offered, unprompted, during a CBS interview in March, as most Americans turned against Trump's campaign. He is doing this to make the whole world safer. Europeans, however, could have played the situation better, according to a European diplomat stationed at NATO. Instead of outright rejecting Trump's wartime demands, they could have expressed a willingness to negotiate. In the end, that's essentially what happened, partly due to Rudy's help. A coalition of over 30 countries is now discussing how they can help secure shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, a vital waterway for fuel exports. Notably, though, the countries only want to do that once the war has ceased, and there's no certainty that the just-declared pause in fighting will hold. In a statement on Wednesday afternoon, a group of leaders from Europe and Canada pledged to contribute to ensuring freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, but didn't offer specifics. The group, which included Germany, Italy, Spain, and the UK, also pushed negotiators to find a lasting end to the war with the coming days. Meanwhile, the NATO chief has also dialed down his public Iran war support. Ultimately, another European diplomat said everyone realizes Rudy can't stop Trump from making dramatic decisions, whether the NATO chief compliments or condemns. It's a tough, thankless job, said Logesko, the former NATO spokesperson.
And our second live feature demonstrates the clash sometimes between medicine and justice. It is written by Patrick LeClamp, who is a News Enterprise editor. Judge orders man in custody to take antipsychotic meds. For more than a year, an accused cyberstalker in federal custody has resisted taking antipsychotic medication that experts say would make him competent to stand trial. Nicholas Bloom might not have a choice any longer. A federal magistrate judge on Monday issued an order allowing the government to force the 37-year-old California man to take medication. U.S. Magistrate Judge Kenneth Schroeder, after hearing testimony from a forensic psychologist and also a prison psychiatrist, concluded prosecutors showed clear and convincing evidence that treating Bloom with antipsychotic medications is medically appropriate and furthers the government interest in restoring his competency. Bloom faces 2 counts of cyberstalking on charges he sent hundreds of unwanted, threatening, and violent text messages and emails to 2 Niagara County residents, including one who is a judge. Schroeder said an affidavit from a Niagara County Sheriff's Office investigator established Bloom is filled with violent rage, not only toward the victims, but also the Sheriff's Office and others, and constitutes a real threat to these individuals. Bloom was charged in June of 2024 and ordered detained the following August. The forensic evaluation report that year from Federal Medical Center in Butner, North Carolina, concluded Bloom was incompetent to stand trial, and later reports indicated he declined to take any psychiatric medications. Forensic psychologist Megan Marks testified in a hearing in October that she diagnosed Bloom with a bipolar schizoaffective disorder accompanied by bouts of depression, manic behavior, and symptoms including delusion. Marks testified that Bloom's prognosis would be good if he takes medication. However, there is no way to restore his competency without medication, she said. Marks delivered some unsettling testimony beyond her observations of Bloom and her diagnosis and treatment plan. He stated if he were released, the first thing he would do is try and find the alleged victim and make sure she is alive and well, Marks said. Bloom's public defender has objected to the government's request to forcibly medicate Bloom, arguing in court that there is no specific reliable study supporting the conclusion it will work. In a February court filing, he said there was no agreement among Bureau of Prison psychologists about Bloom's diagnosis and that alternative methods to forcible medication were not explored sufficiently. Serious side effects are possible for any of the drugs that would be injected into him. Begley also raised the issue of timing, saying Bloom's substantial pretrial confinement lessens the government's interest in bringing him to trial. The government has already initiated civil commitment proceedings against Bloom. The court presiding over that case in North Carolina will hold a hearing to determine if releasing him would create a substantial risk of danger. If that court determines that to be the case, Bloom would be then committed to a suitable facility. Bloom engaged, the U.S. district attorneys told the judge that seeking justice for victims and protecting them underpins the government's prosecution. Bloom engaged in disturbing and escalating pattern of harassing and threatening conduct towards the two victims in this case. The prosecutor said Bloom sent hundreds of unwanted text messages and emails, many vulgar and some violent and graphic, to a co-worker and then to her relative. Bloom and the former co-worker worked remotely from 2019 to 2020 as federal government contractors at the National Archives and Records Administration. He was the Niagara County Women's Supervisor, but the two never met in person. Bloom threatened violence and rape, and the text messages and emails to the former co-worker numbered in the hundreds over 6 months. Distressed, the woman feared for her safety at work and in her home. Bloom also sent unwanted voice and text messages to Niagara County judge, who is related to the co-worker, they said. The messages, also violent and sexual in nature, include references to where the judge lives and works. There is a basic human need for security, and it is through the application of our criminal laws that the government seeks to protect that human need by a timely prosecution of this case, said Schroeder. Nothing has been presented on behalf of the defendant that would lessen the government's interest in prosecuting the defendant or that the defendant faces lengthy civil confinement in an institution for the mentally ill that undermines the strength of the need for prosecution. The prosecutors argued that the time it takes to hopefully restore Bloom's competency would leave plenty of time for him to serve a potential prison sentence. Even if forced medication takes the entire period authorized by law, Bloom would go to trial in a period of time that is far less than his predicted prison term. It is reasonable to conclude that the defendant does not face the probability that he would be held in detention for a period that would substantially equal or exceed a sentence of imprisonment under applicable federal sentencing guidelines, if brought to trial and convicted after having been restored to competency. The first evaluation of Bloom in the federal medical facility indicated he was unable to make rational decisions about his case, that he fixated on his belief he was set up on the charges according to the judge's decision, so he was found not competent to stand trial. It was testified that Marks testified that Bloom told her it would be some form of admission of guilt, me taking medications. In her testimony, Marks recounted that Bloom told her during her sessions with him, "I have lived my life opposite to what the legal documents say. I'm telling the truth about what happened in my case." He seemed okay with staying in the North Carolina federal facility. "This facility is a fine place to be," she recounted him saying. "I sleep, I read a lot, I go to recreation. Occasionally the food is good here. I like my brain the way it is, even if it is a dangerous brain," he said. "If I need to be secluded in a medical center, then that's how it goes." What a complex situation that is, that mental health, people face.
Yep. Route 66, Main Street of America, is turning 100. This is an Associated Press article. There are faster ways to get from Chicago to Los Angeles, but none have the allure of Route 66. To John Steinbeck, it was the mother road that led poor farmers from Dust Bowl desperation to sunny California. To Native Americans along the route, it was an economic boon that also left scars. To black travelers, it offered sanctuary during segregation. And to music fans, it was a place to get their kicks. Route 66 marks its 100th anniversary this year. Despite losing its status in the 1980s as one of the nation's main arteries, people from around the world still flock to it to take perhaps the quintessential American road trip and soak in its neon signs, kitschy motels and attractions, and culinary offerings. Each town has its own history and magic, said Sebastian de Border, a Dutch entrepreneur who, with his wife, breathed new life into the Aztec Motel in Selgerman, Arizona. "It's an essential part of American culture and history," he said of the highway. "The historical aspect is just a very important part of American culture with its influence and its character." Route 66, which runs for roughly 2,400 miles from Chicago through Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, before ending in Santa Monica, California, was stitched together a century ago from a collection of Native American trading routes and old dirt roads with the goal of linking the industrial Midwest to the Pacific coast. Oklahoma businessman Cyrus Avery, known as the father of Route 66, saw it as more than just a way to cross the country efficiently. It was a chance to connect rural America and create new pockets of commerce. Avery knew the number 66 would be ripe for marketing and could be seared into drivers' minds, and he was right. Route 66 has been immortalized in movies, books, including Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath and Jack Kerouac's On the Road, and songs such as Billy Troop's Get Your Kicks On Route 66. Since its November 1926 designation as one of the nation's original numbered highways, the one-time Main Street of America has embodied the promise of prosperity. It became a path of hope for migrants escaping drought-ravaged farms and poverty during the 1930s Dust Bowl and the Great Depression. And during World War II, it was used to move troops, equipment, and workers out west. The post-war boom of the 40s and 50s were Route 66's heyday, as it became a popular vacation route. People generally have a sense of adventure, a sense of curiosity, and you can find that on Route 66. This is the road of dreams, author and historian Jim Hinckley said. Roadside diners and motels thrived as crafty entrepreneurs dreamed up ways to part motorists from their money. There were rattlesnake pits, totem poles, trading posts, caverns where Old West outlaws purportedly hung out, and modern engineering marvels like St. Louis Arch. Barns were painted with larger-than-life ads, billboards teased local attractions, and neon was everywhere. The cherry on top? The food. There were places to grab and go, but also to sit down and relish a slice of home. The Cozy Dog Drive-In, famous for its breaded hot dogs on a stick, has fit both bills since 1949. Inside the dining room in Springfield, Illinois, travelers tell tales of life on the highway. The road wouldn't be alive without the stories of all the places along it that kept it going from town to town, third-generation owner Josh Wildmeyer said. We just survive off each other. The road feeds us, and as long as we put our feelings and love back into the road, it will reverberate with the travelers and the stories of the people. Route 66 was an economic boon to the Native American tribes along the way, but it also left scars of eminent domain across tribal land and perpetuated stereotypes. More than half of the highway crossed through Indian country, and vendor signs often made casual references to teepees and feathered headdresses, symbols easily appropriated for marketing, but not always representative of the distinct cultures found along the route. At Laguna Pueblo, west of Albuquerque, restaurants and service stations sprang up, some operated by military veterans from the Pueblo who were masters at fixing everything from flat tires to busted radiators. Pueblo women adapted too, turning utilitarian pottery vessels into works of art coveted by tourists. Homemade bread and pies sealed the deal. Laguna leaders have long considered the road, or Hiya Nahi in the tribe's language of Kyrgyz, as the corridor of commerce, said businessman and tribal member Ron Solomon. Capitalizing on that potential, the tribe has built a multi-million-dollar empire of casinos, burger stands, and other businesses. There were also dangers along the route, particularly during the Jim Crow era, when black travelers had to rely on guides like the Green Book to find safe lodgings and services. Especially for long-distance travel, segregation was a fact of life, said Matthew Pierce, state historian for the Oklahoma Historical Society, and so black motorists needed to know a safe place to go. The Threat filling station near the central Oklahoma community of Luther wasn't listed in the Green Book, but it did serve as a safe haven between two sundown towns where people who weren't white needed to leave by sunset. The station offered barbecue and even baseball. Edward Threat, whose grandparents opened the station in 1933, recalled a TV program about travelers getting their kicks on 66. By and large, the black traveler didn't get a lot of kicks on Route 66, he said. If they got some kicks, it wasn't the kind you could think of.
Well, that was an interesting article.
Yes.
Travel down Route 66. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Thursday, April 9th. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, please call us at 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been
Ruth Nabutniak
and Pat Lamont. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of your day.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes